Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
I'm delighted to be with all of you today as we talk about a very, very important topic which is valuable for you as a teacher and very valuable for every child you will use it with. You are going to be working with a child with a learning disability. But before we talk about learning disabilities, it's important that we know the child first. So through this journey, we will together learn more about what is this? What is this child development? What does it mean? What are the different areas? What are the different stages in each area? How does the brain get involved in all this? What is my role through a child's development? And very importantly, how does learning disabilities connect to child development? And so we're ready to go. We will first start with understanding a child holistically, understanding different parts of the personality. I've called it roots to grow and wings to fly. Every child you work with is a miracle. Every child is born with a unique potential. No two children are alike. And capable of human excellence. Every child is entitled to human rights. The sad part is only some develop their potential. Many do not. So let's start at the beginning. What drives the child's development? There is a basic potential and there is a nature and a nurture. Only when the two come together correctly does the child's potential blaze. If not, the potential just fades away. We will see it again. Watch. So there is a potential and there is the nurture. When they come together correctly, the potential blazes. If it is not nurtured, the person's potential fades away. So what is this potential? Like we said, every child is born unique with a unique potential. And the brain controls every action of our lives. The baby is born with billions of these brain cells, they're called neurons. But it is only with the interaction that these connections get made and there is rapid development of the brain in the early years. So let's look at it. How do we learn? How does this development happen? To make it very simple, we have just three colors here. So there is the part which is called the sensory cortex. Now this is like the windows to the world. We receive information from the outside world through our sensory areas. We make meaning out of it. And that's the green area. We make meaning out of it. These are called the associative areas. And then we act. And that's the motor area. So through life, and especially in the early years, the more stimulations a child receives, the more experiences the child receives, the greater the development in the brain. What is the most important thing any child needs, whether it's a child with a learning disability or not? Think about it. What all of us need, there's a great need for affection and appreciation and feeling loved and capable. Much like every seed needs a soil in which it can be nurtured, children need to feel loved. So every time a compliment is paid, every time the mother hugs the child and says, "Oh, very good," the child's feeling of self-worth increases. When that self-worth increases, what happens in the brain? It makes more connections, becomes stronger. So whatever the child has done well and receives appreciation, those connections become stronger. We do it naturally when the child is very young. The child walks fast, we say, "Oh, very good, come here, come here, come here, come here." The child talks for the first time, we are all there for him. But somewhere along the way, we don't give that much attention. Not that the child needs that much, but all of us need strokes. So this is the beginning. These are called positive strokes. Feel good. So it could be how well you're taking trouble to write. Good for you. How nicely you're sitting in the chair without getting distracted. I appreciate that. Reading is difficult, but you are trying your best. That's wonderful. These statements, if you are doing them, good for you, because that's going to help your child. Let's see what's the opposite of this. Is there an opposite? Yes, and it can be very detrimental. They are called negative strokes. We do that without realizing. These are called cold pricklies. That picture I have drawn is like nails poking you. Try and press your hand and try and see how it pokes. It is every time a child is excluded or a child is abused or humiliated. Humiliated in any way. In a group of children, you suddenly pull one out and say, "See how well the others have done, and look at this fellow, what a mess he's made." Or a child is rejected because he looks different or he can't do something as well as the others. Every time there is rejection and humiliation, it depletes the child's self-esteem, makes him feel weaker, and their negative experiences can prevent children from realizing their potential. There's a point worth thinking about. What are you doing with your children? Making them feel good? Good for you. Are you, without realizing, saying things they shouldn't be hearing? Think about it. So if you've done this, you're set to go to the next step. Much like a gardener, when he gets a seed, he first settles the soil and makes it warm. And warm is the wrong word. Makes it moist. Only in moist soil will any seed grow. We all know that. Just like that, only in a moist, nurturing climate will any child also develop holistically. And so we begin again. We've just said every child is unique. We have said that every child is born with an amazing potential, and that every child needs to be nurtured and nourished. So what are the different areas now? We are going into, so what does child development mean? Let's go to that. So let's go to the next point. Children reach their potential when all areas of development are nurtured holistically. What are all areas of development? Think about it. Are you buying only clothes? That's only one area. Are you buying them lots of toys? That's just one more area. So what are these areas? Let's have a look. As important, all these areas, the different areas, they are interconnected and equally important. So like we said, the brain governs all of this and it enables development. And there are different areas. So here are the different areas. There is a physical area of development. There is a sensory area of development. There is a motor area. There is communication. There is cognition. Don't get worried about the words. Cognition only means understanding, development of understanding. Social development, emotional development, and play. So how many did you get it? Give yourself a pat on the back. Now let's go into each of these areas to understand a little more about this. What does physical mean? When you're talking about physical development, you're talking about general health, you're talking about hygiene, you're talking about diet and sleep patterns. An important point here, development is different from growth. What is the difference? Growth is an increase in size. You say a child is growing taller, a child is growing bigger, a child is growing fatter, a child is growing stronger. So there's an increase in size. What is development? Development is an increase in the complexity of structure and function. So a little 6-month-old, if he has to pick up a ball or a toy, his whole body will shift to pick up the toy. The same child, when he is 12, if he is to pick up a ball, he will put his leg out and flick it towards him. Every action, every function becomes more complex. So let's take a minute to look at even the physical dimensions of our body. You will find that interesting. Here's an interesting point. This is physical development, by the way. This is growth. When the baby is very young, the proportions are different. It's a 1:4. That is, the head to the body is 1:4. And as we grow older, it is 1:7, as you can see here. But that's why when you see babies, younger children, you think slightly different from how they should be looking. But they'll grow out of it as they develop. So we did physical. Now let's go to sensory areas. Remember when we saw the image of the brain, we saw the red shaded areas. That's called the sensory cortex. All information for the child comes in through the senses. Even this moment now, as you're listening, all information is sound, or you're seeing this on your screen. Likewise, you get the touch of your clothes on your body, same smell and taste. So we are talking about vision, which is the ability to see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Now don't get confused with these 3 words. One is vestibular. Just imagine you're sitting on a chair and suddenly someone tips it. What do? You catch your balance and come back. Now that's a sense. That is an inner sense. It's called vestibular. There's one more sense, very important. It is called proprioception. Now this is a sensation which gives you an awareness of your joint position. Small example. Don't look at your body. Can you make out whether your hands are folded or they are stretched out? I'm sure you can. Can you make out whether your feet are crossed over or apart? I'm sure you can. Proprioception gives us a feeling of joint position. And the last one is also very important, especially when we go and work with children with learning disabilities. It's called interoception. What is interoception? It's the awareness of our inner organs. Like knowing we are in pain, we know whether they are hungry, so there's an awareness of the inner organs. So there you have it. We typically know about vision and hearing and smell and taste and touch. But we have three more. There is vestibular, proprioception and interoception. There are links that might be given to you which you might find useful to read through, especially when you work with a child who may have a difficulty in one of these areas. One more thing. So you think touch is only one area? Well, actually touch has four. What are those four? It's when you say ouch, that hurts. So that's a question of pain. Or you suddenly put your hand in a scalding tea and say, whoops, too hot. Touch gives you temperature. And sometimes when someone's holding your hand, you see you're pressing too hard, you get pressure. So when you're talking about touch, you're talking about pressure, pain, touch, and temperature. All these work very naturally all together. We're not even aware of it. That's what your brain is doing. Every one of this means this is what the brain can do. Are we giving opportunities for our child to explore these experiences? And then we go on to motor. What is motor development? I'm sure all of you know. It's about movement. The child being able to turn over and sit, crawl, stand, walk, run is all movement. And then balance in any position. Only when you get the balance can you go to the next stage of development. Then your posture and how we use our hands. You would have heard about gross motor, fine motor. Typically, these areas, movement, balance and posture are gross, and hand function typically talks about your fine motor development. We've spoken about the motor area. Let's go on to communication. Aha, you'll say, I know what communication is, and you're probably right. Here is what it is. It is about being able to understand, express thoughts and feelings. Now, is this important? Yes, because did you understand? No. So if you didn't understand, do you think you can communicate back to me? No. And yet, do you realize that your child has learnt the mother tongue in the first year of life? Just listening to sounds like these, which have become language and he's made meaning of it, that's the power of the brain. And that's why you'll see that some children who grow in environments where people are talking to them, all the time interacting with them, have a better vocabulary. Whereas some children who are typically not interacted with that much are not so good at their communication. Now we come to understanding. Understanding involves all the stages. It's about learning about things around us. So it involves our attention, it involves our understanding and memory. How do things work? So it's fascinating. First, children just look at things, and then they reach out to them, and then they learn to sort them out, and then they learn to sequence them, and then one fine day they're reading and writing. But these are all the steps. So this understanding is about learning about things from us and things in the world. We go on to social development. This is our ability to interact and get along with others. And then we go on to the emotional areas. What is emotion? Everyone says, I'm emotional. Emotional is the ability to handle our feelings and feel comfortable with ourselves. All this development happens in the very, very early stage. Probably emotion is the first. Children develop attachment even before. They call it the pre-attachment stage, right from conception. By the way, development is a continuous process from conception to maturity. It continues. And development means it's not what a child is doing, it is how the child is doing, which will come to our next stage as we talk about. But first let us understand these areas very well. And then of course there is play. Now play is connected to all areas of development. Let me give you an example. A little 3-year-old or 2-year-old runs to his mother and say, Amma, Ai, Mama. And he runs to a ball, picks it up, and he says, Mama, and throws the ball to the mother. And the mother throws it back to him, and he throws it back to his mother. And after a little while, he says, good boy, to himself, pats himself on the back, picks up the ball, and puts it in the place it should go. Now, do you think in that play all areas were involved? Was sensory involved? Yes, he saw the ball and went to it. Was motor involved? Yes, he walked to the ball. Was communication involved? Yes, when he spoke to his mother. Was understanding involved? You may say, no, there was no book. But do you realize he didn't go and pick up a book and throw at his mother, he picked up a ball. Whereas a much younger child of about 6 or 7 months would probably pick up anything and throw at the mother. That is development. Was there social? Yes, he interacted with his mother. By the way, the parent is the child's first friend and the best toy in the world. Was there emotional involved? Yes, he praised himself. It's good for us to do that also once in a way. And so like we say, they are all interconnected. Now I'm going to ask you a question. What is the most important area of all of these? Think about it. If you said they are all equally important, you are correct. They are all equally important and interconnected. But at the core of the personality is the child's values. This is the child's moral and spiritual values. What are you raising the child with? And the child's self-esteem. You will recall that in our earlier presentation we had said when a person feels loved and capable, that is self-esteem. You've given a child self-esteem, it's like vaccination for the soul. There is a feeling of self-worth. Whatever challenge comes, the child can face it. It is like you take a glass and put some saffron or cardamom at the bottom. And after that you pour water, you pour milk, you pour anything, it's going to be fragrant. You take another glass and put some bitter, neem or whatever, you put it, and then whatever you put, it will continue to be that way. Point being made is that underlying is the need for self-esteem and feel good, and 2, development is interconnected. All areas play together. Let's see another thing. I'm not feeling well today. Do you think I can learn? If physical is not all right, cognition won't work. I'm feeling bullied and my emotional self-worth has gone down. Do you think I'll be able to run as fast or write as fast? By the way, when there is any threat or there's any stress, the brain releases an acid called cortisol. Now this floods the brain, and when it floods the brain, it paralyzes action. And that's why sometimes the child just freezes and can't work. It affects all systems. So what the child needs, any child needs, is a feeling of good work, self-worth, and to see that any vibrant program is aware of and gives importance to every one of these areas of development. we spoke about the areas of development, and now we'll go one step further. Why is this important, you might say? Well, it is important. Remember, there's a child out there who depends on you. You're going to make him better in what he can do. So this will help you understand the child better and thereby enable you to plan a better lesson, taking into consideration all important factors. After the areas of development, we will go on to stages. Remember, we said development means increase in complexity of function. So, you're going to say, how does each area become more complex with age? A child of 1 year doesn't play like the child of 10. A child who is 10 years old does not play like a child who is 15. These are all different stages. Do we have to remember too many things for this? Not at all, not at all. We need basic 4 points. So, let's look at it. What are the stages of play? I will show you those 4 and I will try to sketch them for you. Play impacts everything. By the way, in early years of life, the only way a child learns is through play. There is no other way. Don't think you can sit a child of 3 down to teach him. You can't teach children. Children learn through discovery and play. They receive through the senses, all the senses, and they connect, and that's why it's called sensory motor. And it's all through play. So, what are the stages of play? Here are the stages. The first stage is solitary, then parallel, then cooperative, then organized. And these are just words. So, let's see what happens. When a baby is very young, he plays by himself. Have you watched children play? They'll be looking at a young child. The mother will throw a rattle there, or there'll be this thing that goes round and round and round, and the child will try to look up. Here you have a child lying down and looking at it. The child learns through looking and reaching out, looking and reaching out. This is solitary play. This goes on for about a year. Then what happens? A year or 2. Then comes to a very fascinating area. It is called parallel play. Have you watched children play in a sandbox? There'll be a child over here playing with a bucket. There'll be another child over here playing with another bucket. They are both playing, but they are not playing with each other. They are both playing, but not with each other. This is called parallel play. Now, this child will walk from here to here. This child will walk back from here to here. By the way, this is what my sons did when they were young. I have triplets, so I've learned a lot about play watching them. So, one of them would walk, pick up a box of sand, a bucket of sand, walk all the way here and drop it here into this heap. This other son would pick up the sand from here, walk all the way back and drop it into this pot. They were crossing each other, but they never play with each other. This is a classic example of parallel play. Fascinating stage. Watch children in a preschool. By the way, that's your homework. You want to know about children, go watch them. Listen to them, talk to them. You'll see all areas of development coming together. Don't look at books. No book will tell you what a child can tell you. Watch different ages, you'll see the different stages of each area of development. And that will be your homework. And when you're better equipped with understanding that, when you find a child with a difference, you'll be able to say, aha, this child is playing at this area, or understanding at this area, and this stage. And then you've got a good profile. I hope this makes sense to you. So in the first stage, we saw solitary play. And then we saw parallel play, where he's playing with alongside others, but not with others. The third one is called cooperative play. This is when children play with each other. You would have seen that. They sit together, they play. What do they learn in this? Let's do a small exercise. I'll teach you a whole exercise on this. Now when children learn to play with each other, so this one has the ball. Now this child has to receive the ball. There may be another child sitting here. This child learns to wait. So that's emotional development. They learn to ask each other for something. There's communication. He's learning to be dexterous, hold the ball. That's motor development. He's looking out at the ball, sensory development, having a lot of fun together. So this is cooperative play where they work in a group. So all the games come here, all that you see children in school time doing. This is cooperative. Children who don't have this skill are left out. And that comes to a particular kind of child with a learning disability. You might have come across that child who's not able to fit into the group. And then we come to the more advanced stage. Development is really like a flower opening up, stage by stage by stage you see the next stage coming up. The next stage is organized play. Organized play is like when you play cricket or you play more complex games that any adult young teenager wants to play with. So that's very simple. So there you've got it, the 4 stages: solitary play, parallel play, cooperative play, and organized. Now let's look at learning. Learning also has different stages and they're all interconnected. Cognition also, there are 4 stages, very important for us to know. Birth to 2 years, how do children play? Have you ever watched a child? Little ones will just lie down and it's all sensory. Very young children, when they see something, they will focus on that and watch movement. If they hear a noise, they will still. When the noise stops, they again start kicking. So it's all independent, sensory, motor. And they learn about the world only through play. If you see a child of about 8 months or 9 months, have you watched? Again, fascinating. He will take anything you give him, look at it, try and make sound of it, smell it, try and taste it, and then try and throw it. When he's smelling and tasting, the mother comes running and saying, don't. But he finds that one more noise and he says, oh, if I do this, she says something. And he learns to make connections. But this is the next stage. This is all sensory motor. Children learn through their senses and reach out with their bodies. So actually, understanding again, remember 4 points. First step, the child learns through his body and his senses. If the child doesn't have experience of it, chances are he will not learn it. Small example, if I say banana, what comes to your mind? Or if I say ball, what comes to your mind? Let's take banana. Do you see the color, you see the shape, you see the size, you get the texture, all senses, including how it feels when you hold it. Now if I use the word passion fruit or blackberry, something which you don't get locally, chances are it's only in the book. The beginning of all learning is through play, and that's the first word of the magic mantra, E, experience. And that's the first stage of play, of sensory motor. The second stage is called the pre-operational stage. What I'm sharing with you was actually done by Jean Piaget. He's a famous psychologist, Swiss psychologist. He did much of his work just watching children. And he's come up with these 4 stages which any good teacher would know and learns in the training. So the second stage is called pre-operational stage, and this is the stage when children learn to form images of what they already know. So they move from objects to pictures and language. So they learn that a language represents something. For instance, the child is running and sitting on the chairs, and the mother says, chair, chair, chair. So the child learns that this that I'm sitting on is called chair. So that takes you to the next level, which is L, language. And then next time when you show the child a picture of a chair, he is able to connect through his experience. And this is the next stage of understanding, the pre-operational, when he moves to the two-dimensional stage. Children who have not had opportunities here often land up with poor foundations. Remember, the early years are foundation years. All that we've spoken about till now are the foundations. They can't be seen. First 5 years, rapid brain development. The stronger the foundations, the higher the building will go. The more the child will learn. So what happens in this stage? I will give you one small example. Try it if you know a little 4 or 5-year-old who is in this stage. If you show a child you show the child, you keep objects. I've drawn it here, but you actually keep objects. And you say, are there more here? Are there more squares here of their sweets? Then you say, are there more sweets here? Are there more sweets here? Or are they the same? And the child would count and say, this is 1, 2, 3. Remember, this is a drawing, but we are actually using objects here. So then you would ask the child, are there more sweets here? Are there more sweets here? Or are they the same? The child might count and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and say they are the same. In front of the child, if you say, okay, now just watch this. And the same 5 objects, not pictures, you do, they're not bigger, they're the same. The same 5, keep it here and ask him or her, are there more here? Are there more here? Or are they the same? Chances are they will say this is more. And this is because variables here. He has to see the number and the size. Now this actually is a pre-maths concept called conservation. You will learn it when you do your math. It's a pre-math readiness. The child says this is more. Then there's another very interesting experiment that Piaget did. He took 2 glasses, equal sized, and in front of the child filled it with a drink to the same height. And then ask the child, is there more drink here? Is there more drink here? Or are they the same? So the child will look closely and say both are the same. In front of the child, as the child is looking, he takes another vessel and tips it here. So he takes another vessel and takes this fluid from here and pours it out. And them, is there more here or is there more here or are they the same? And the child says more here because he sees more here. This is also conservation. These are just 2 small examples. Now this happens before the child forms concepts. So this, according to Piaget, this is the second stage, which is called the pre-operational stage. That is, before the child has learnt to form concepts. Remember, color, number, they are all concepts. You can't, yellow can be the sun, it can be a table, it can be a sari, it can be a desk, it can be a pen. So it doesn't have, a concept is an abstract property. Now children need to go through a lot of these experiences before they form concepts. So this is one of the points of pre-operation. We just have time for this. I have just shown you one. So between 2 to 6 years, the child is learning to form images in his mind. He is learning to form concepts. He has not yet formed them. So that's why we have preschooling at this stage before they go on to grade 1. And then we go on to the third stage. The third stage is called the concrete operations. That is like middle school. The child has learnt his concepts, he is getting on to answering questions, doing maths, you are doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You are learning to read, write compositions. That is the third stage. And the fourth stage comes at 12 years, which 12 to 16, which is called formal. Third stage, like I said, they learn, their concepts are getting formed, they are learning to think logically, they are still thinking step by step, but they are learning to analyze, use logic. And then we come to the fourth stage, which is formal operations, where they start doing abstract thinking, they learn to hypothesize, they learn, that's when later on that we will get on to algebra, geometry and your trigonometry and practical parts of physics and maths. So what does all this mean? It means there are 4 steps. You can't reach step 4 without doing step 1, 2 and 3. What are step 1, 2 and 3? The child needs actual experiences, then he learns to move to pictures, then he learns to go on to symbolic. These are symbolic learning. Here you are. It's E, L, P and S. Experience about an experience that through the senses, then the language that describes the experience, then on to pictures, then on to symbolic learning. So if your child is having difficulties here, go back to an earlier stage. Having difficulty here, go back to an earlier stage. All that we talk about is only for us to keep remembering what are the stages of development in different areas. We spoke about the areas of development, remember, and how each one is connected to the other. Now in this segment we are going to talk about how social and emotional areas deeply affect all areas of development. And there are certain stages of social emotional development that we are going to talk about. Just as there are 4 stages in play, we talked about 4 stages in understanding. Now we are going to learn about the early 4 stages. Actually, there are more than that, there are 8. And this is done by Erik Erikson. But for us, since we are working with younger children, we will talk about the first 4 stages. All areas of development are equally important. Some of them are obvious, like the physical area and the child's understanding and his movement. Often social emotional areas being hidden or not so obvious get overlooked. And these are by far the most very important areas. So let's look at what are the stages of these area of development, how important it is for us to know the stages in order that if a child has missed a stage, we as teachers can help fill the gap. These are foundations. So I've called, they're foundations for life really. So the first one is trust. The child right from when he is born needs to, the importance of attachment and trust can't be overemphasized. Typically in the first year, the child bonds with a caregiver and develops trust. So when the child is hungry or needs food or affection, there's someone who provides it for him. And what does this do? It sets him for life. There's a belief that things are fine and he can trust the world. You'll find many people not able to trust, and if you go back very early in their lives, they wouldn't have had this. Very important. The child needs to feel that he can trust the caregiver. So a lot about attachment. The second stage is the need for independence. After the child receives a lot of affection and things, he starts wanting to be independent. And this comes at 1 year, 1 to 2 years. And the child, this is as motor development is happening and he's learning to walk and move around, he actually wants to do things on his own. Now if he's not given that, what do you think will happen? He'll continue to be dependent. That's the point. You've got to allow for that independence. So this is when their courage and will develop, and once they're allowed the opportunities, children learn to become independent. The third stage is of initiative. Once they're made independent, children want to reach out to help others. This is the time when empathy also develops. The child starts taking an initiative. It could be as small as telling the mother, can I get you a cup of tea? Can I get the father a newspaper? Can I help my grandmother with something? So this is initiative. Can I lay the plates? Little things between 2 to 6 years. Now, and this is the time when if the parents are encouraging yet consistent in discipline, the child learns that some things are not allowed, and this is what the child learns to take initiative. So let's do an example here. Typically a child of 4, he's playing with his toys. His father comes home. He decides he's going to help his father. So he runs to the kitchen, picks up the most important, most expensive glass tumbler there, pours some water in and rushes to give it to his father. And there's a parenting point here, whether you're helping the initiative or not. If you're going to say, no, drop it, keep it down, you're going to break that, the child is going to, self-esteem will go down a bit. But if you're actually watching him and you say, oh, how nicely you're bringing it, you're putting one foot in front of the other, you're bringing a glass of water for your father and being careful not to spill it, chances are he will balance himself perfectly, give it, feel good. So initiative starts here. That's what it is. I'm combining what developmentally a child requires. And this is an important point. At each age, a child requires something for developing to the next stage. Now, if those opportunities are provided, he goes to the next stage. Those opportunities are not provided, they lie dormant. So if he is not allowed to take initiative from when he is very young, suddenly when he grows up, you want him to say, come on now, do it yourself. Chances are he's going to find it very, very difficult. So that's the importance of stages. What can I expect from my child in this age, in this area? That's what we need to know. And that's the point of all these segments. After that, so the child has been given trust, he's been allowed independence, he's been allowed to help, he will start developing competence. This is between 6 and 12, and it could be any of these. It could be with animals, it could be with music, it could be with mechanics, it could be anything, any of these. But if the cup is not full, if the child doesn't feel confident, is not feeling loved, doesn't feel trusted, these things take a little longer to come. So that's the point of the importance of psychosocial development. Motor development is much easier. This is one area I haven't spoken about, but like you all know, motor development happens very quickly in the first year. The child lies down, then turns over, then learns to sit, then learns to crawl, then learns to kneel stand, then to stand, and then to walk. But there's one important principle that is important for us when we work with children, and that is that all development, motor development, is from head to toe. This is a very important principle of development for motor. Motor development happens from head to toe. So like we said, first the child is lying down, then the child turns over, then he learns to sit, then he learns to kneel stand, he holds on, then he learns to stand, and then he learns to walk. So this all happens in particular times, and we only realize when something doesn't happen. So point is, development is from head to toe, and development is from the inner part to the outside. It's from head to toe. So that's why you'll see the child first is lying down, then he turns over, then he comes to sit, then he kneel stands, and then he stands, and then he walks, then he runs. So this is one dimension. On the other plane, development is from here to the extremities. This is very important. You will see children when they are very young, they want to throw big balls. That's good for them because the movement is happening here. Then when they are 3 or 4 year old, they want to help with making chapatis. Very good for them because they are developing here. This is the development. And then finally, these start. So they peel potatoes, peel this, all the things they like to do. Finally, the writing, for writing you need these 3 fingers coming together. Now of course everyone's using computer, you need 1 finger. This 1 finger comes at 10 months and it's called raking. The child will rake, but use only 1. But for writing you need this. What is the point? Point being made is, if these areas have not developed, this is going to be very difficult for a child. Often when a child has a problem with writing, you go back and saying, you haven't written 1 line well, go back and write 5 lines for me. It's like saying, you can't climb 5 rungs of the ladder, now climb 5 again. When there are gaps, this is the gap that must not be there. So what do? You've got to fill it up. How do you fill it up? Go back to earlier development. How do children do in earlier development? Through play. What play? Watch the play of the child of a younger age. I hope I'm getting my point across, because like I said, you as a teacher can make such a difference in the child's life. And these are foundation years. He may not even remember all that you've done, but you know that what you did, you knew what you were doing. And then when he's ready for it, the handwriting will come. So development head to toe and this way. So that's motor development. So we've spoken about every area of development, and we've spoken about all stages of development. I haven't spoken about communication. Now there's a mantra for this. Listen, speak, read, write. So when the child is communicating, first children listen, then they learn to babble, then they speak words, then they speak sentences. Basically it's that. I won't go so much into that, but it's listen, speak, read, write. So I'll give you a couple of important milestones. By 1 year, the child will be using 1 word and a gesture. By 2 years, he'll be using 2.5 words, sentences. Of course, today children are so smart, you give them the input, they'll pick it up. And do you know that in the first year of life, the brain is equipped to take in the sounds of every living language. So children can pick up sounds so well. Alas, we don't give them the opportunity. So if you think you're good in music and you can talk, please do talk to your child. It's going to help him communicate. One more important, every one of these has different milestones, but we don't have time for that. If you have got the essence of that, then it's okay. Look up any book, but better than a book, watch your child. Go to the park, watch the children, watch how they do it. Watch a 1-year-old on the swing, watch a 3-year-old on the swing, watch a 7-year-old on the swing. You'll see the grace, the flexibility, the ability they hold their bodies with. You'll be amazed. So we've done all of this. Don't forget the self-esteem of the child. Now the question is, how is this connected to learning disabilities? Why do I have to learn all this when I'm only going to work with reading, writing, spelling? Good question. We'll go to that segment now.